Making sales is an essential aspect of any business, and if your business is selling product, then you would do that through the order entry system, specifically by entering a transaction and an invoice transaction. From the menu that's presented here, I'm going to select Invoices to take me into the invoice entry and maintenance process. You'll notice the screen has taken me immediately to a field asking me to enter a Deliver To customer number rather than the invoice number. The assumption here is that most of the time when you're coming into this process, you're going to be entering a brand new invoice rather than calling up an existing invoice. The invoice number won't be allocated for my transaction until the very end, as you'll see when I hit the Save button. You'll also see that many of the fields are filled in automatically with today's date, the assumption being that I'm going to be entering information in a live environment and want to deliver this straight away. If you look at the navigation area, you'll see at the moment there are only 2 pages available to me, the invoices and a note log area. Watch what happens when I enter a customer code in. If I enter in my trusty RF customer code, a couple of things have occurred on the screen. The first is I now have 2 additional screens to my invoice process. I can now enter products because once I know who I'm delivering to, I know what pricing is going to be in effect, and I also have a screen to enter special charges. The screen has also displayed a warning message to me. In this case, that message says that site access is difficult and make sure that freight's charged appropriately. This warning message, which I'll dismiss just by clicking OK, and also these delivery instructions have come from information that was originally entered up on the customer master file itself. I'll just show you where. I'll just right click on this. We'll call up that customer master record, and over in the accounts section here we'll see that we have a sales note area, which is that alert message that popped up on the screen, and also standard delivery instructions that are going to be displayed by default on every invoice I do. Some other things that are set up here and are important in terms of the invoicing process is whether a customer reference on an invoice is optional, mandatory, or mandatory and unique. The mandatory and unique is important because the last thing you want to do is have an order arrive on a fax machine, someone picks it up, processes it, then half an hour later someone finds the order on a desk, thinks no one's done it, and wants to enter it up again. So by flagging the customer reference or an order number as being mandatory and unique, not only do we have to physically enter a customer order number in order to be able to save our invoice, it also has to be a unique number. There are other aspects or things that are set up on our customer as well, which are important for invoicing, specifically the deliver code, how this customer normally has things delivered to them, and also their pricing category, which will determine pricing for us. But that will be covered in a separate training session, or separate video at least, looking specifically at the customer file. The important thing I wanted to get across is just the fact that entering those alerts up, or this sales notes up, and also these delivery instructions means that when you're entering the invoice in, most of the information that you need to enter is filled in automatically for you. You'll also see that once I nominated my customer up here as well, where the delivery was actually going to, the system also determined the normal freight method, how this is normally delivered. You'll remember when we looked at that on the customer, it said that this person normally uses Discount Freight Express, which I don't think actually exists anymore as a company, but never mind. The customer reference, you'll also notice, is a red field. And we also have another red field down here in terms of a pick by time. And throughout the system you'll see other fields which are red, and that is an alert or a visual cue for you that this is something that has to be entered. For example, if I hit the save button now, I'm going to get a message coming up that says, look, there are a whole lot of mandatory things that you haven't entered. The customer reference on the invoices page, this field here, isn't set, or it's set for mandatory and there's nothing there. The pick by time has been not filled in, and likewise there's no pricing or discount fields entered at this stage. So if I actually enter an invoice or an order, customer order number here, my customer reference, which would be typically a customer order number, you'll see that the field has immediately changed from red to black. Everything is okay entry-wise. The pick by time here should have come from this delivery method. The fact that nothing is there tells me that when this freight method was set up, I didn't nominate that the courier, Discount Freight Express at this stage, normally comes to our building at say 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I'll just set that up there for next time, and next time is going to be right now. I'll just remove what I've done. I've just hit the new button, which is a way of getting rid of everything I've just entered. I get a warning that says, look, what you're about to do, you're going to lose everything. Is that okay? And I'm quite happy with that, so I will just click the OK button and everything clears. This time, when I enter my customer code of RF, and by the way, if I didn't know that, as I said, I've got search facilities, so I can put in part of the customer code or the entity that they belong to or a pricing category, or customer details. Here I can put in one or more words about my customer, and we keep cross-references, and you can search on the customer name, their address, their telephone number, their postcode. Any snippet of information you know about a customer can be used to go and find them. So if I put in something reasonably broad like Ross and hit my search button, the system will go out and it's found 200 customers that have got Ross in their name or address or somewhere similar. You'll notice that some of the Rosses are actually parts of other words. The searching here is performed by looking at an exact match of the characters that you've entered. So cross contains Ross, and so it was found as part of my search. But if I said Ross who lives at Wallsend and repeat my search, I'll now get a much smaller list of customers coming in. Now, rather than Wallsend, the postcode for Wallsend, if I just get this back to a rather large list, or actually let's just put in 2287 as a postcode as an example, I'll get a list of the 33 people that are in the 2287 Wallsend area, and if I just put in Ross, my list will be refined once more to just the things that I'm after. And I'll select the customer I'm after just by clicking on it, return back to my original screen. Once more I get my alert message coming up telling me that I need to pay special attention. And these sales messages, sales alerts, can be anything that you think is appropriate that you need to tell the salespeople. You'll also notice now that I have a pick by time coming in automatically. I still will need to enter in my customer reference or the customer order number in order to ultimately save this invoice, and once I leave that, the field will turn black. But I'm going to say if I wanted to, I could put in our references, and I can also allocate picking priorities. Now, picking priority is important because it basically says how urgent is this invoice that we're entering up. Now, the priorities are things that you actually maintain yourself. So you get to nominate the text that is associated with these, and typically you'd only have 5 of them. The style or the colour that will be used to highlight those. So an urgent pick is going to be flagged as blue. Can be picked is going to be green. A low priority is going to be light green background, and so forth. And you can also nominate users that are allowed to set invoices to these particular priorities. So you may not want everyone to be able to nominate an invoice as being an urgent pick. So here I've actually limited who the people are that can do that by selecting here that only these users can actually set that particular priority. And as luck would have it, I'm one of those users. This is also where you would set what the default priority is. Now in a normal operation, I would suggest that your default priority is probably going to be can be picked. So we'll just save that and get back to our regularly scheduled event. Of course, it hasn't automatically changed this because that was determined using the rules that were in place at the time, but I'll now just flag this as being can be picked. And we'll now go in and enter some product details up. The quantity is the first field that we're being asked in terms of actually making the sale. And this is because if you think about the normal sales conversation that you have with someone, they're normally going to lead with the quantity of a product they want. I'd like 6 heavy-duty widgets. I'd like 15 left-handed skyhooks. People don't normally say, I want skyhooks times 15. So to keep the order entry process flowing as part of the conversation, because we can and should potentially be entering this invoice up live whilst we're talking to a customer on the phone or even over a counter, the first thing they're going to do typically is to tell us how many of a particular product they want. If I was selling a single unit, I'd happily accept this field, but it may be that this person wants 6 of a particular product. They're then going to tell me what the product is. If I know the product code, I can key the product code in. So for example, to keep my life easier, I have a product code called RF and I can key that directly into the system. And I've got this thing called a promotional message coming up. And that's driven, surprise, surprise, if I just go to maintenance on this particular product, you'll see I have a whole lot of options here I can access in terms of my right click. I can check my product availability. I can do a price cross-reference. If this was an assembly product, I could do an assembly inquiry. If this was a special build product that I built with tally sheets, I could enter the tally sheet up now, or I could put a special request in. Maybe the person wants me to build this particular item and paint it pink with purple polka dots. I can do a search, but what I really want to do at this stage is maintain my product. And that's just so that I can show you that when the product is originally created, you get the ability of entering up a promotional message, which is really a prompter for someone who's on the telephone. Sort of like McDonald's. Do you want fries with that? You have the opportunity of aiding the salespeople by putting messages on there to prompt them in the sales process as well. Oh, you're buying the nut, perhaps you need the washer as well, perhaps you need seals. Put it in there, because although everyone who's making a sale right now knows the business inside out, the next person that you employ probably doesn't, and they'll find the help you can give them through these promotional messages is quite invaluable. I also should point out, although there is a separate video for this, that the cost and selling price for the product is also determined. We allocate the product to a pricing category, set a base sell price and so forth for the product. However, and in this case there was no special pricing for that product. If I wanted to override the price, you'll notice that the unit price and the discount are both dim at the moment. If I try and click on there, I can't physically get in. And that's because the only way I can put in a special price is to go and enter an override reason. Why do I need to change the pricing that's been set up for this customer buying this product on the system? And that's important just from an ongoing analysis point of view. If you are having to meet price challenges from your competitors, it's important for you to be able to determine that looking forward in time, so that you can see, okay, over the last month, how many times have we had to match a price or something similar, because there always has to be a reason you're overriding these rules rather than, I was just having a good day. Now I'll just show you very briefly these reasons. You obviously establish yourself. And it may be, let's go and set one up for meet price. I'm just going to create any arbitrary code for meet price for competitor 1. And of course, it should only be meet price for competitor, meet price as a short description, price for XYZ company. Um, you, I am, if it was me, if I'm meeting a price for a particular competitor, I would have a separate override code for each one so I can see who I'm having to price match most often. And that also comes back to the whole price review process in terms of, do I actually need to adjust my pricing, because it's crazy to have to override the price of a product every time it goes in. These price override reasons can be protected with a password if you want. So unless you know the password, you can't actually use the price override code. And don't worry if you have passwords and so forth set up for these things, unless the salesperson or whoever is entering the transaction has access to this maintenance process. They can't just click maintain and get there. Your overall security is not compromised. These price rules can also have associated with them maximum discounts that you're allowed to give. In terms of a percentage and or dollar amount, and also whether you're allowed to sell something at less than cost. You might say, well, we never sell anything for less than cost. And yet, if you think about it, you may give away promotional items. Sometimes you give people samples and so forth, which in turn should be authorized by someone who knows the appropriate override code, just so you know where product is actually going. And you can also set a minimum acceptable margin. We'll allow us to discount providing we make at least 10% on the product or something similar. For the purpose of this exercise, actually I might just put a password in here. I will do a super secret password. Oh, I told you what my password is. Never mind. We'll just hit save at this point and come down. And because the code that I used had a password in it, I now have to actually put the password in to be able to use that price override code. If I don't get the password right, then I don't get to override the price. But if I do get it right, SECRET, I told you again, never mind. If I click OK, these fields have now become open. So if I actually wanted to sell this product at $100, I can put in $100, and my 20% margin is now getting me to the stage where I'm not actually making sufficient as an overall margin for my product, so I might just reduce that down to $118 and give them the 20% off. I can keep on entering products up here as required. This table will simply fill up. If I wanted to go and search for a product, if I was just selling a one-off type thing, once more I've got my search facilities. I can put in part of a product code. I can limit my search criteria to only show products that are available. I have the option of showing inactive products or not. Normally you wouldn't, because an inactive product, sort of by definition, is something that you don't really want to have to order in, but you have the option of going and looking at back catalogues and so forth if you want. You can nominate some words from the product description, or you can also use the generic product if you know that. If you don't, then you have a search which allows you to go and put in keywords about the generic product or the generic category, and if you don't know those, you can hit search. Search on that particular field, and get up to the category codes, and here at last we finally have 600 odd individual categories that could be used. But of course, normally you're going to know something about the product. I'm going to go look for a product that has a Shane in it somewhere. We should have a couple of those. So the system will think and should return all the products that have Shane in the description somewhere. You get a quick snapshot in terms of the product and its normal pricing and so forth. Pick the product you actually want to sell. We might want to sell one of these things, which was probably a bad thing to do, but it was a promotional item in this case, and away you go. The pricing and so forth comes in automatically. This time you'll notice that the system has said we've delivered 0 and we're back ordering the 1. If you look at down the bottom here, we have a little stock status display that tells us how much stock, and we're actually out of stock of this particular item. If I just click back on the first product, you'll see this first product we had 17 available, which explains partially why we could deliver 6, even though 22 were allocated. And you might think, well, that maths doesn't work. You know, if I've got 17 on hand and if I've allocated 22, why would I have 17 available for sale? And the reason is, if we click on one of these to get more of an insight into what my allocations are, the allocations here are a transfer and an order, and I have my system set up so that order allocations don't reduce free stock. That's a exercise for a separate discussion, but basically the system determined that I had enough stock of this thing, so it automatically assumed I was delivering the 6 that I had ordered, whereas on this second line I was ordering 1, I had no stock. The system assumed that I was actually going to be back ordering it. I might just change the product that I'm selling to something we probably do have in stock. I happen to know my code is SF3 in this case. I still didn't have stock of it. Oh, badly so. My parameters are also set up to say that I allow my stock to go into negative. Now, once more, if I wanted to get a better picture of my in-stock position, and I probably don't because I obviously don't have any to sell here, but if I just click on the quantity in stock field, I'll be taken out to an inventory inquiry. Now, the inventory inquiry, it assumes that I want to look at the entity that I'm in at the moment. It gives us a brief picture of what's actually sold and been purchased and so forth over the last number of months. It also gives us a quick snapshot of what my average usage has been over the last 3 months, the last 6 months, the last 12 months, and well, once more, there's a separate video that will take you through the joys of a product inquiry. And once more, because I have said that I am allowing my product stock on hand to actually drive negative, it could be that I've just seen the truck arrive, I know that these products are there, so I can actually say, yes, I'd like to deliver that 1. The back order quantity will change, I'm happy with my pricing. End of story. Repeat the exercise for as many products as you're physically selling. If we come to the special charges screen, the special charges for your business are probably not going to be, or they may be fuel levy, I don't really know what they are, but these were established when we first set your system up, and they're going to be defined in your order entry parameters as individual add-on charge items that can appear on an invoice. So it's really just prompters, and typically that's going to be freight or something similar. Enter in the amount, end of story. If we come back to our front screen, and this is just by way of illustration I suppose, if I click save at this point in time, the system at this stage allocates me an invoice number. And you'll also notice it's come here to a field that says OK to pick. Now I'm going to click that for the moment, and there's a whole other story associated with this which we'll cover in another video, but I'll just hit save. Now from here you can, if you so desire, print an invoice, print a pack slip, or print a pick slip. I would suggest normally you don't do any of the above. From a sales perspective, assuming you're in a wholesale type environment, don't click those buttons. And the reason is that there is a whole warehouse management system that ties into the invoicing and kicks in place in terms of when these things should be picked. And I'll show you where that is now that we safely have our invoice on the system. I'll just exit out, or I could just say new and prepare for my next invoice if that's what I wanted to do. But we'll just exit out. And one of the other items I have on my invoicing screen is a thing called a picking schedule. Now, a picking schedule is very useful in terms of managing the overall warehouse operations. You'll see that there are 3 tabs across the top. The first tab, which opens by default, shows us all of the invoices that are on the system at the moment that need to be picked. This screen will actually automatically refresh itself every minute or so. So if you can afford to have a large screen set up out in your warehouse area, up high so it's visible from pretty well any angle in the warehouse, people can just glance up at it. If they see a full screen, they know there's lots of things to do. In this case, they see a fairly short screen, so they know that there isn't a great deal of work that needs to be done at the moment. Doesn't mean they should slack off though, obviously. The second tab will show us any invoices that are being picked right now. And the last tab, if there were any invoices that had actually been finalised for the day. Now there's nothing in those two tabs at the moment, but we'll have a look at what happens as things progress here. I'm just going to exit back out and go into this routine, which would typically be open all the time in the warehouse area for the people that are actually doing the picking and packing to turn up and say, right, I need something to go and do. What do I need to do right now? They'd select their name from the list, and just reminding you once more, if we come back out to here at the moment, on the picking schedule itself, we've got an invoice for Ross to pick, then an invoice for Marjorie, then another invoice for Ross. Now I should also point out that we can manually manipulate the order that these invoices are picked in by hitting the Move to Top button. For example, if I wanted to make this last invoice get picked right up the top of the list, I can click Move to Top. I'm in for disaster, but I'll click it anyway. When I click the button, you'll see that it's moved to the top of the green list, but it hasn't moved to the top of the blue. Blue is the urgent to pick type stuff, green is okay to pick. The whole thing with move to top is it really says move to the top of the category that I'm in, but the fact that this top one was flagged as an urgent pick means that it is always going to take priority over the lower priority type things. So I'll just move that one back up to the top. You'll also notice that the way that the move to top works is it really just cheats and adjusts that pick by time, because this list is sorted by picking priority, and within the priorities by the pick by time, which would normally be when the couriers are actually arriving. Because obviously if a courier is arriving at 2 o'clock and another courier is arriving at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you would want to pick the orders for that need to go at 2 o'clock before you do the ones at 4 o'clock. Conversely, once the courier that arrives at 2 o'clock has arrived, you would also then want to bump those orders to the bottom of the queue, or those invoices at least to the bottom of the queue, because they're not going to go until tomorrow. There's a separate process we'll look at there in terms of the warehouse management, that they just record the fact that a truck is gone and things will move. So here we'd have that screen which has all of the times for the couriers and so forth. So if this Australia Post guy had actually been and gone now, we'd simply come into this screen, hit the Truck Gone button, and any invoices that were on the system flagged with that method would now be set back so that it won't need to get picked now until tomorrow, because it is too late. And if you don't want to do this as each individual courier comes, you can also just come in and set all of these things to tomorrow. Let's say, because it's now end of day I'm working out, so all of my pick times have now rolled over to my my next date. Or you can set everything to be as per today if you accidentally rolled them forward. But if we come back to our next pick slip routine, and if we nominate ourselves from this drop-down list, I'm going to be Mr. Picker, you'll notice that it's actually brought up 2 invoices. Both of the invoices for my Ross Ferris customer. Now, you might find that strange. I'm just going to exit out of here, because if we looked at the picking schedule, you might have nearly expected to do the first of these invoices, then the Marjorie invoice, then another Ross invoice. But what really happens is this top invoice has got priority. It's the one that we're actually going to be picking right now, but the system detects the fact that there are other invoices that are okay to pick. Whoops, I'll pick the right option yet. That are okay to pick, that are going to exactly the same delivery address. Now I need to stress this: exactly the same delivery address. Because if the delivery addresses are different, if you're doing, say, a drop shipment out to one of your customers, you would have overtyped the delivery address, it's going to be going somewhere else, that won't get consolidated. So we actually look at the physical delivery addresses that these things are going to determine whether they can and should be picked together and they can be packed together. Now, the picker would simply hit the save button. At this point, you won't be able to see it, but the system will have generated a pick slip for us that would have come out onto a printer, and I'd now be right to move on and start picking those items. Back out on our picking schedule screen, we'll now see that in terms of items that need to be picked, there's only one invoice. Our In Progress tab now has the two invoices that I've just produced picking slips for. And of course there's still been nothing finalised. So I go out, I pick my stock. When I've finished doing my picking, I come back to my packing bench and I'd record my packing details. I'd call my invoice number up. The picking slip normally would have, or what I would suggest you consider having, is a barcode on it. You have a barcode reader so you can just hit the pick slip. With the scanner, I'm going to cheat and I'm just going to pick this manually. So scan my invoice in. It's assuming that I've delivered everything that I said I was going to be delivering. If there was a short delivery, I could actually just change the quantity here. If there was, and I probably should have changed that so it said freight, but if there was freight or something similar that had to be done, I could record those add-on charges. I would have gone out, measured, wrapped the thing and so forth. I can put a delivery docket number in, because you may be generating that from your freight company and so forth. We know who the actual picker was. If the order is packed by someone else, record who actually did the packing. I'd suggest you also record how many boxes there were, what the weight is in kilograms, physical weight, and also, if appropriate, a cube equivalent. Now, when you hit save at this point in time, the system will automatically produce the right paperwork. Now, I emphasize right because if we just come back and look at this particular customer, part of his setup is how he would like his invoices and credits to be delivered. The option that he currently has selected is that he would like to send a packing slip with his goods and email the invoice. I have other options to print an invoice with the goods, so if the customer wants invoice with goods, you can accommodate that. Or you can produce a hard copy invoice with the goods and email the copy to them. So depending on what the customer's requirements are, you set this up accordingly. They might want to get a copy of the invoice physically in the package and also email a copy. And, sorry, just obviously here the email address that should be sent to. So if that's set up on the customer, when I hit the save button, the appropriate thing will happen. If I've requested a copy of the invoice, I'll get a hard copy invoice come out. If I've requested a delivery docket will come out. Except if, when I entered my invoice, I typed in or changed any of the name and address fields on the invoice, the assumption that the system will make is that you're actually doing a drop shipment on behalf of your customer. So in other words, you may be sending the goods to your customer's customer. And the last thing in the world you would want to do is to accidentally send your customer's customer a copy of the invoice. So in that case, if the delivery address has been changed to something that is non-standard, the system will always produce a packing slip to go with the goods. irrespective of what's actually flagged on the customer's master file. It will email a copy of the invoice to the customer. But the key element here is you simply hit the save button. There will be a piece of paper that's generated at that point in time, and that piece of paper will be the right piece of paper for you. So I've hit save. Invoice would now be spitting out. I then may record the details of the next invoice, because remember I had two of them in here. But if we just come back to our picking schedule at this point in time, what we'll see is now we have one invoice in progress, and one of the invoices that I had has now been completed. That's 16909. I should also point out that if we come and have a look at that invoice 16909, what we'll also find, apart from the fact that I can't now make any changes because the system has generated an invoice for me, if we look at the product screen, remember we overrode the quantity that was being delivered. The customer had ordered 6. We'd originally said that there were 6 going. When we actually got out to the warehouse, we couldn't find them. There were only 5. On the packing details, I entered the fact that we're only delivering 5. The system has then automatically back-ordered the remaining 1. And the guy out in the warehouse didn't need to know anything about pricing or anything similar. It's just a case of he went and changed the quantity that he was physically packing into the box because that's what he knew. Now personally, I really love this whole notion of the picking schedule. It gets rid of the blame game. You don't have situations where a salesperson says, I told you guys out in the warehouse this had to be picked first, or the warehouse guys don't have to say, you never told me to do that, you're always giving us the blame, or whatever that internal argument is. And maybe you're lucky and you don't have an internal argument, but in my experience there always tends to be a little bit of friction between the warehouse and the guys that are on the front line in terms of telesales and so forth, taking orders and so on. The picking schedule concept removes that. Not only does it get rid of pieces of paper floating around the warehouse, which invariably will get lost, it also gets rid of chat time, because you don't have to now go out and tell the guy, hey, could you pick this quickly for me? And there's never any possibility of there being a blame game being played, because the guys that control the picking schedule, which ultimately are the salespeople, although the manager of the warehouse may have some input into that in terms of adjusting schedules, but the guy who is actually picking the goods, the only thing he has to do is come into this next pick slip routine. That's his job. He just hits that, and whatever someone with authority has designated that the next thing is that he should pick, that comes up. Now, when I'll just show you what happens at the very end. I might go and this guy does something, which was our MK order. Now the next time someone comes and says, get my next picking slip, pick their name from the drop down, we get something that hopefully never occurs, but you get the magical congratulations, there's nothing left to pick message. And of course, if we come back out to our picking schedule at this point in time, that's going to reflect the fact that there's nothing to be picked. We now have 2 invoices that are in progress being picked, one by a guy called Picker, the other guy, one from Freddie, and we still have our invoice out there that was finalised before. Now, we've covered what I'd consider to be a straightforward invoicing scenario here. There's a follow-up video for this that covers the scenario where you might be doing some light assembly of products that are actually being sold. There might be items that you put together for the purpose of sale, stick them on the shelf, and there may be none on the shelf at this point in time. So we'll look at how the order entry or the invoicing side of things can once more dovetail into that warehouse management aspect and help ensure that your customer service levels in terms of getting product there and also satisfying the demand for the customer to get products on time that you've promised and said, yes, we can get that done today, actually takes place. But that's the purpose of our next video, and we'll look at where and why you might adjust this OK to pick button on an invoice as well. So please join me on the next video as we take our next step on the road to mastering order entry in the Visage system.